As our cities grow outwards and upwards, and our climates warm up, the stage is set for more mosquitoes, more infections, and the next devastating outbreak.
Climate change pushes these temperatures more into these suitable zones for mosquitoes, so more people will become at risk.
You just need one infected person for the chain of transmission to start again.
It could come back. It really could come back.
This is a hunt for diseases transmitted by a tiny insect that is by far the world's deadliest creature. Near the deserts of Utah lives a tropical disease scientist.
I came back after 55 years, and my family was all still here. So my brothers are here, I have sisters here, my parents are dead. I'm 81, so I guess they better be.
It took me a long time to decide what I wanted to do in life, but once I found it, it was love all the way.
Dr. Dwayne Gubler is one of the world's foremost experts in mosquito-borne diseases. He has helped nations from Africa, America, and Asia, and he's a respected consultant to Singapore. The veteran disease hunter says mosquitoes are the deadliest creatures in the world.
Mosquitoes cause more deaths every year than all other causes combined. The main reason is that it needs blood of animals to lay its eggs and to persist in nature. And that means that it has to take blood meals from animals on a repeated basis. But it became a very efficient way to transmit pathogens from animal to animal and to maintain those pathogens.
Every year, mosquitoes infect nearly 700 million humans worldwide, and the diseases they carry kill over 1 million. These tiny creatures have humbled the powerful throughout history. They've infected kings, popes, and presidents. And they've halted armies, both ancient and modern.
To understand the months of grueling work and preparation that go into a raid such as this, we must start at the very beginning.
The Second World War brought America's troops into contact with mosquitoes. Countless soldiers lay sick or slain by diseases transmitted on tropical battlefields.
In the Pacific and Asian theaters, tens of thousands of troops that were put out of order because of malaria and dengue.
The Second World War triggered major scientific advances in mosquito control. A new medicine helped to eradicate malaria in many nations. But malaria has endured, and it continues to endanger half the world's population. In 2018, malaria infected 228 million people and killed over 400,000. Today, a child dies from the disease every 2 minutes. A major malaria battleground is located in SISAKET province, on Thailand's border with Cambodia. In the region's many rubber plantations, this disease haunts the long-suffering workers.
7-8 ปีมานี่เป็นทุกปีปีละ3 ครั้งก็มีตอกกรีดยางกลางคืนครับกรีดยางกลางคืนก็มันเกี่ยวกับยุงก้นป่องที่มันกัด ยังป่วยอยู่ครับก็เลยยุงกัด ตื่นเช้ามาเต็มเลยขานี่มันเป็นเลือดจุดๆเลยเพราะแบบมันกัดแล้วมันยุงก้นป่องใช่ไหมเลือดมันจะออกไอ้ยูก้นนะทางก้นติดมีแต่เลือดเป็นจุดๆไม่เกิน3 วันแล้วเป็นแล้ว
In spite of these malaria risks, the impoverished workers can't afford to stop working.
มาให้ผมเข้าป่ามาให้ผมกรีดยางให้ผมทำอะไร
It is the female Anopheles mosquito that transmits malaria. Humid forests and marshlands are her hunting ground of choice. There, she seeks blood to nourish her eggs. She pokes her long, thin mouth through the victim's skin. While sucking blood, her saliva introduces malaria parasites. These parasites invade liver cells where they multiply and burst out in their thousands. These parasites infect and destroy red blood cells. The victim's red blood cells become depleted, causing anemia and sometimes death. When Anopheles mosquitoes bite infected persons, they ingest more parasites and sustain the cycle of infection. At Thailand's Mahidol Oxford Tropical Medicine Research Unit, Professor Nick White has been studying parasites that cause malaria for over 4 decades.
It's a little parasite that infects the red blood cells, and when people have malaria, they have many of these parasites in their blood. When people become ill, they have at least 100 million, and when they're very ill, they could have 1 billion parasites.
These single-celled parasites are called plasmodium. They are resilient, adaptable organisms, and scientists are finding them hard to eliminate in the borderlands.
It's a disease of marginalized communities. Access and prosecuting a vigorous anti-malaria campaign in these difficult areas is difficult.
In SISAKET province in northeast Thailand, an initiative is enabling remote border villages to access malaria care.
สวัสดีครับสวัสดีครับครับเป็นจากไหนมาเนาะ
เป็นไข้ครับ
เป็นไข้
เลือดครับ
The Malaria Post enlists local volunteers to test people for the disease.
ชื่อคนไข้นายแสนกันจังหน่อยเนาะอยากเข็มบ่เนี่ย
ยานอยู่ครับ
โอ้อยากเข็มอ่ะบ่เจ็บบ่เจ็บบ่เจ็บแต่ว่าถ้ามีมาลาเรียคลินิกชุมชนณตรงจุดนี้คือเขาดีใจแล้วเขาก็คิดว่ามันสบายสำหรับตัวเขาเข้ามาปุ๊บคือเขาได้เจาะตรวจเลยแล้วก็รู้ผลเลยทันทีถ้าเขามาไม่ได้ผมก็ต้องเอามอไซค์ออกไปช่วยเขาไปตรวจหาเชื้อมาลาเรียให้เขาโดยที่เราไม่ได้คิดถึงค่าใช้จ่ายอะไรใดๆทั้งสิ้นอยู่บ้านเลขที่เท่าใดลูก
ครับ
Volunteers can administer malaria drugs and therapies,
นิ้วนางข้างซ้าย
but they must refer serious cases to the district hospital.
ขึ้นไปครับ
This hospital serves 3 townships. With the help of Mahidol Oxford Tropical Medicine Research Unit, it's established a new malaria research centre.
มีเซ็นเตอร์มาลาเรียรับผิดชอบแล้วเขาก็จะกระจายงานเองคอนเน็กชันเองอย่างเช่นคนไข้คนนาย A มาเป็นมาลาเรียเขาก็จะรายงานตั้งแต่กระบวนการตั้งแต่ว่ามาปุ๊บนาย A นี้เป็นคนไข้ที่อยู่ในพื้นที่เสี่ยงจะต้องถูกรัดขั้นตอนคือจะถูกทำบัตรแล้วก็ส่งพยาบาลคัดกรองตรวจมาลาเรีย
But worrying trends are now emerging. The research centre is tracking malaria strains in patients that can resist a wide range of our drugs.
People often ask why resistance always start here near the Thailand-Cambodia border. And the honest answer is we don't really know. The most important drug we ever had for malaria was a drug called chloroquine, which was introduced just after the Second World War. And literally hundreds of tons of chloroquine were consumed every year. But because so much was used, and because it was used without any other drug, resistance to chloroquine emerged right here in Thailand.
The region's malaria parasites spread chloroquine resistance around the world. New malaria drugs, like artemisinin, had to be deployed. To extend the life of these new medicines, doctors use them in combination with other treatments.
We use more than one drug to protect against the emergence of resistance. So each component, if there are two drugs, they both protect each other.
But some malaria parasites have evolved and can now resist a cocktail of drugs. Disease control authorities in Bangkok believe this multi-drug resistant malaria is a serious crisis.
อันนี้ก็จะเป็นเป้าหมายหลักหรือเป็นการขับเคลื่อนงานที่สำคัญอันหนึ่งผ่านเวทีแอปเมนก็คือต้องมีการนำข้อมูลเรื่องของมาลาเรียดื้อยาเนี่ยมาแลกเปลี่ยนกันนะคะแล้วก็คุยกันว่าเราจะช่วยกันยังไงทำกิจกรรมยังไงเพื่อที่จะควบคุมไม่ให้มาลาเรียดื้อยาเนี่ยมันแพร่กระจายออกไปในวงกว้างค่ะ
Over in Singapore, Dr. Pablo Bifani is testing a new drug that could work on multi-drug-resistant strains of malaria.
Our aim is to find a new anti-malarial that will target multiple stages of the malaria parasite, the blood stage, but ideally also liver stage and so on.
Though Dr. Bifani has made some breakthroughs, he argues that constantly inventing new drugs is not the best way forward.
So typically the cost of developing a new drug is estimated at $1 billion, and it takes about 10 to 12 years. So the investment required is very significant, and there is no much profit to be made from developing drugs for neglected disease. So rather than trying to continue to invest in developing new drugs over and over, we can mitigate that problem by proper management of the use of the existing drugs.
Dr. Bifani is concerned about another emerging problem. New strains of malaria crossing from wildlife to humans.
The idea of zoonotic disease is very important now, especially with COVID-19. Human malaria has been eradicated in Singapore. However, you do have monkey malaria in Singapore.
In 1982, Singapore was declared malaria-free by the World Health Organization. However, it continues to see hundreds of malaria cases each year, mostly imported.
The mosquitoes are still there, and so the potential for malaria to come back is there.
Rapid urbanization separated people from the slums and swamps that malaria-carrying mosquitoes thrive in. But high-rise living can't keep out another invading mosquito that positively thrives in the concrete jungle.
As malaria came down and Singapore grew, then Aedes aegypti took over.
Singapore, a city-state in the tropics. When the monsoon rains come, the mosquito population rises, and pools of water become fertile grounds to lay their eggs.
Singapore having a tropical climate is very conducive for mosquito breeding, especially this Aedes aegypti, which also is very adapted to urban setting.
Aedes aegypti. It emerged from the forests or jungles of Africa, and that's how it got its name. But as it spread, it became very adapted to thriving in urban centers. right? The built environment. And that's where humans tend to now congregate because of economic activities.
Aedes aegypti is an invasive species of mosquito that thrives in Singapore's concrete jungle. It only needs a pool of water the size of a coin to lay its eggs, and the city has a rich variety of breeding grounds.
It likes to breed in artificial containers. It likes to stay in homes, people's homes. Infrastructure that we have built for ourselves, Aedes aegypti takes advantage.
By the end of September 2020, nearly 200 dengue clusters had been reported. Amid the COVID-19 pandemic, many Singapore residents were working from home. This put them in striking distance of home-dwelling mosquitoes.
Aedes aegypti doesn't fly very far. The peak biting period is during the day. So usually for adults, we're at work. But now, every day of the day, of the week, we're at home.
The rise in citizens working from home has likely contributed to Singapore's worst ever dengue outbreak.
Singapore could see 1,000 dengue cases weekly in the weeks ahead.
Another fatality, taking the toll to 20.
Dengue cases here, which has crossed the 25,000 mark this year already.
Dengue outbreaks spread fast, but they always start with a single bite. When an infected female Aedes aegypti mosquito bites a human, the virus enters the skin cells and blood cells before infecting the lymph nodes. There, the virus multiplies and floods the bloodstream. Within days, the virus can infect major organs like the liver and heart. When the human host travels to another neighborhood or returns home, other Aedes aegypti mosquitoes can suck up their infected blood. These mosquitoes can then pass the virus on to their next victim. In severe dengue cases, blood vessels hemorrhage. Blood pressure drops, and the heart is forced to pump harder. Without medical assistance, the heart can shut down, pushing the victim towards shock and potential death. In the city of UBON, Thailand, Sunpasit Hospital deals with regular outbreaks of dengue. The wards fill with dengue patients, and most of them are children.
ขอคุณหมอดูหน่อยหมอชาลิยานะครับแจ็คพอตเป็นไงบ้างลูกวันนี้สบายดีแจ็คพอตมีไข้ไหมไม่มีไข้เนาะ โดยปกติแล้วไข้เลือดออกก็จะมีความยากมากกว่านะคะเพราะว่าไข้เลือดออกเป็นโรคที่มีอาการเลือดออกได้คุณแม่แจ็คพอตปวดท้องไหมลูกไม่ปวดแล้วนะมีคลื่นไส้มีอาเจียนไหมเช่นในเด็กเนี่ยก็อาจจะมีเรื่องของเลือดกำเดาไหลมากกว่านะเลือดออกตามไรฟันมากกว่านะคะแต่ว่าในส่วนของผู้ใหญ่เนี่ยในอาการของเลือดออกก็จะเป็นเลือดออกในทางเดินอาหารมากกว่า
There is no widely available drug treatment for dengue. Children recovering from the disease can develop immunity to certain strains of dengue and then carry this into adulthood. Most Thai children contract dengue, so herd immunity to this virus is high. Back in the 1960s, Singapore also had high immunity levels to dengue.
In the 60s, because dengue was so common, children were getting dengue. So much so that by the time they grew up to become adults, they were immune to dengue because they got it as a child, right? But once you started to control the mosquito population, children were no longer getting dengue. so the transmission level goes down. Over time, Singapore's immunity level as a whole population started to go down.
The island's crowded slums and swamplands were ideal breeding grounds for mosquitoes. A Destruction of Disease-Bearing Mosquitoes Act was passed in 1964, alongside a post-independence mission by the country's first Prime Minister to make and keep Singapore clean.
We must create an awareness of everyone's duty to keep Singapore clean. And the way any neighbor soils his home and breeds flies and mosquitoes has become your personal business.
And what that did was it stimulated the scientists in Singapore to develop a very effective mosquito control program, basically involving the people. They were free of dengue, essentially, for the better part of 20 years.
By the 1990s, there was far greater mosquito control. Children who now grew up in Singapore weren't exposed to mosquito-borne diseases.
We know from studies done in the past that children entering primary school in Singapore, only about 0.8% of them have ever had dengue before.
But mosquito control has become a double-edged sword. While it brings down rates of infection, it can render citizens less immune to outbreaks of dengue. Scientists have long tried to create vaccines against dengue, but with mixed results. Dr. Lakshmi has spent over 2 decades studying the dengue virus and has recently discovered how it evades detection.
I find that dengue is quite a smart virus, and then there's numerous ways it can disguise itself. It's a villain, and your immune system is the police. So this villain can change its shape when it wants to escape from the policeman.
The cryo-electron microscope at NUS has greatly enhanced Dr. Locke's research. It's enabled her team to freeze, photograph, and 3D model exactly how the dengue virus changes shape under different conditions. Dengue is sneaky. It's a shapeshifter. In a mosquito at 29 degrees Celsius, the virus's envelope is smooth. But inside a human with an average temperature of 37 degrees Celsius, the virus turns rough. Once the human host reaches a fever of 40 degrees, the virus morphs into a bumpy or club-shaped form. This shape-shifting enables the virus to evade our immune system.
For vaccine development, the vaccine is used to train your body immune system to recognize it. So you must put all these different structures that it can change into so that your body will be trained to recognize all of them.
Dr. Shimi's discovery has helped researchers see a unique aspect of dengue's form. And the virus isn't just one kind of shapeshifter. There are 4 different dengue serotypes. Developing a successful therapy that works across all 4 dengue serotypes has been challenging. But Singapore's Agency for Science, Technology and Research, A*STAR, has found a solution. Its SIGN 3C lab is in advanced stages of testing for a new treatment that uses antibodies developed in a lab. This is the SIGN 3C monoclonal antibody. Once injected into a patient, these antibodies hunt down the elusive dengue virus. They seek to bond with unique structures on the surface of dengue. Once they fix together, the antibodies rally the immune system to attack the virus. These special antibodies can bind with all 4 dengue serotypes.
The antibody will be the key, and it will recognize specifically the pathogen, so like the key entering the lock. And when it's recognized, it neutralizes the virus. So the virus cannot enter the cells or cannot grow and will be eliminated by the body.
This treatment was developed by studying the immune cells and antibodies of patients who had successfully recovered from at least 2 different dengue infections.
When you have multiple infections, you tend to develop antibodies which could recognize all the dengue viruses. And that's why our approach was to select patients which have seen at least 2 dengue infections. And we will take the blood from this person and isolate the B cells, the cells which produce the antibodies.
Singapore's National Centre for Infectious Diseases helped A*STAR identify recovered dengue patients with the most potent antibodies.
We established a cohort to enroll patients with acute dengue, follow them up over a period of time. From there, then we have further laboratory tests in collaborations with A*STAR to understand how the body responds. And the availability of monoclonal therapy is one of the options that currently we are looking at.
If the SINE3C antibody passes testing and manufacturing checks, it could be heading to Singapore hospitals and clinics in the near future. And beyond Singapore, this therapy could have a significant global impact. But the clock is ticking. Dengue has become endemic in more than 120 countries. And as our climate heats up, mosquitoes could spread even further.
There's a lot of mosquitoes under here. A lot of mosquitoes down here, too.
Climate change threatens our world. Risking our water and food supplies, and endangering our energy security. Warmer climates also risk unleashing another crisis: mosquitoes.
So Aedes aegypti mosquitoes are constrained by certain temperature bounds. And as the climate warms, we're going to see that more months of the year are suitable for its survival and transmission of these diseases. And so more people will become at risk.
Gainesville, Florida. Aedes aegypti mosquitoes are a rare sight in northern Florida. During the winter, temperatures can drop to 6 degrees Celsius. But at the University of Florida's Emerging Pathogens Institute, Dr. Sadie Ryan believes mosquito numbers are rising in the city.
So the Aedes aegypti mosquito is invasive in the Americas, and it has been spotted again in Gainesville for the first time since the 90s this summer. And it's worrisome because it's the major transmitter of diseases like dengue, chikungunya, and Zika. People think tropical diseases aren't here in the US because the US is not in the tropics. And I think that maybe they don't realize how much of Florida and Texas really do have ample conditions.
In temperate northern Florida, mosquitoes tend to be active only during the summer months. But in the tropical south, mosquitoes are present all year round.
These aspirators are essentially mosquito vacuums. So we're going out with this mosquito aspirator to kind of collect blood-fed mosquitoes. We'll bring them back into the lab, and we'll kind of Jurassic Park style extract DNA from them in order to figure out what host animal they've been feeding on.
Dr. Lawrence Reeves is tracking the feeding patterns of mosquitoes across the region. And his fieldwork has taken him from the deserts of northern Mexico to the rainforests of Brazil. He collects samples using an aspirator, which is similar to a large vacuum cleaner.
So here in Florida, we have several mosquito species that are dominating the landscape. One of them is going to be Culex nigra that's really abundant in places like this. So with this mosquito, throughout most of the year, they're not really feeding from humans. In the spring, they'll feed mostly from birds, but when fall comes around, they start shifting towards mammals.
Dr. Reeves's fascination with these insects began when he was bitten by a mosquito in Asia.
So when I was doing my master's research in the Philippines, I picked up dengue from probably an Aedes aegypti mosquito that was flying around at my grandmother's house over there. So then I spent about a week not eating, hanging out in an un-air-conditioned room, pretty miserable with dengue. It was probably the worst experience of my life. Ever since then, that kind of pushed me to study mosquitoes. So now, anytime I'm in the field, I'm definitely protecting myself from mosquitoes. A lot of mosquitoes under here. A lot of mosquitoes down here, too. Here in Florida, we've been seeing kind of, in recent years, an influx of new species coming in from around the world. So we have these like Central and South American mosquitoes that are showing up here in Florida, and they're becoming established. So it is possible that through warming temperatures, our climate here in Florida is more suitable for these mosquito species to become established. You want to turn that off? Yeah, thank you. All right. There's probably 200 to 300 in here. So I'll put them on dry ice and then look through them under the microscope. Awesome.
Dr. Reeves is concerned that the Aedes mosquito that gave him dengue fever in the Philippines could be spreading across Florida. The Asian tiger mosquito, Aedes albopictus, first arrived in America in the 1980s via a shipment of used tires.
Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus are mostly going to be in kind of these more developed areas. They feed on humans as hosts, and they rely in part on human-made water-holding containers for their larvae. So we have to sort the debris from the insects that are collected. We got a good number of blood-fed mosquitoes, but I'm not seeing any Aedes aegypti or any Aedes albopictus. We did get a good number of Culex nigra, though. So any place that is kind of forested or just natural, we don't see quite so many of these two Aedes mosquitoes. Today, we really only see Aedes aegypti in far southern Florida and in the most urbanized areas.
Miami is located on the southern tip of Florida. The city's turquoise waters and sun-kissed beaches attract millions of tourists all year round. But could the growing presence of Aedes mosquitoes threaten to drive them away? At the Miami-Dade Mosquito Control Department, Director Dr. William PETRIE is closely monitoring the local mosquito population.
Teresa, that is a pile of mosquitoes you've got there.
So this is a collection of mosquitoes from remote areas, from the CDC traps and DG traps. We have a lot of Tingyarrinchus, which are the darker mosquitoes that you see. And we also have...
Dr. PETRIE believes that before the COVID-19 pandemic, diseases transmitted from Aedes mosquitoes had the most detrimental impact on Miami's economy.
Zika outbreak in 2016 caused the state to announce a state of emergency. CDC took the unusual step of declaring part of Miami-Dade County recommended not to visit. So there was a tremendous economic impact.
Miami's ports connect the USA to the Caribbean, Central and South America. The city is a gateway to Northern America for people from countries where mosquito-borne diseases like Zika and dengue are endemic.
It's not mosquitoes coming in with disease. That's a misconception. It's human beings traveling with the disease. Dengue figures for the Americas approaching 2 million cases for this year alone. So dengue is certainly on the horizon, and that's the mosquito-borne disease that we at the moment have to be most vigilant against.
Back in North Florida, Dr. Sadie Ryan is tracking how climate change could create more regions for Aedes mosquitoes to flourish. Her models calculate that 29 degrees Celsius is ideal for Aedes aegypti to transmit dengue.
What we know is that there's going to be this northward push of those warmer temperatures. So when you have a new population that has never seen these diseases before, they may not have the immune profile that other populations where these diseases are already circulating have. And so you'll often see explosive outbreaks. And so that's the major concern. In South Asia, we see that there's this huge increase in the new number of people who are in these suitable temperatures for transmission. And that's because it's even a small amount of shift with climate change. We'll be encountering a lot of new, highly dense populations.
Climate change and globalisation have become near impossible trends to control. And if new medicines are too costly to develop, what's the next step in the fight against mosquitoes?
If we remove those species from Earth, would you expect there to be an environmental consequence? I don't think so.
In this housing estate in the east of Singapore, a surge in the number of adult mosquitoes has been detected.
When there is an outbreak and there are lots of mosquitoes, then spray spray with insecticide can be useful.
Singapore's National Environment Agency is charged with combating this rise. Loaded with insecticide, 20 fumigators will simultaneously spray the estate's housing blocks. They aim to engulf clusters of adult mosquitoes, leaving them with nowhere to hide. Insecticide has long been a key weapon in the global fight against disease-bearing mosquitoes. Over in Miami, Florida, the Miami-Dade County Mosquito Control Department has fitted powerful insecticide sprays onto a fleet of trucks.
This is one of our newer trucks. It's a Ram heavy-duty truck that's outfitted with a special piece of machinery called a Buffalo turbine. And what it does is basically mix water with a chemical known as BTI, and that is shot up in the air 100 feet. It gets over trees and vegetation, and it gets over people's roofs, and it helps us get a very nice even spread of this BTI, which again acts as an agent to kill mosquito larvae.
But veteran mosquito-borne disease scientist Dr. Dwayne Gubler argues that today's insecticides have a limited impact on mosquitoes.
They last for only a few hours, and then the toxic effect is gone. And so you have to spray them in the air and hope that the aerosol actually contact a mosquito. The Aedes aegypti, which is a very secretive mosquito that likes to rest indoors, and especially in closets and hidden places, the insecticide that they spray in the air outside doesn't reach the mosquito. So it's very ineffective in controlling the mosquitoes, and therefore ineffective in controlling dengue and other diseases.
In the past, authorities and consumers alike had access to a strong insecticide with a lasting impact.
It begins with the war-borne development of DDT. This diabolical weapon of modern science saved millions of humans, but killed billions of...
An insecticide, DDT, had a residual impact for 6 months. So instead of spraying DDT in the air, they actually sprayed it on the walls of the houses. When the mosquito, after it fed, went and landed on the wall, it's contact poison, so it killed them.
By the mid-20th century, DDT was being used around the world to stop mosquitoes from spreading malaria, dengue, and yellow fever. But in 1972, it was banned by the USA.
One of the problems of DDT is it's not biodegradable. So if you've got an insect that's killed by DDT and a bird comes along and eats that insecticide, it was causing real problems with the reproduction of a lot of birds.
DDT also fell from favor as mosquitoes adapted to become resistant to it.
What caused its downfall, because it was used so much in so many different areas, resistance has started to develop. That resistance is genetically controlled, so once a mosquito becomes resistant, its progeny are resistant. So you select out a whole population that are resistant to the insecticide.
With lessons learnt from DDT, today's inspectors rotate the use of different insecticides to prevent mosquitoes from becoming resistant. But some species have already become battle-hardened.
In particular, Aedes aegypti is resistant to almost all conventional insecticides. So clearly there has been a real need for new forms of control.
In Singapore, a new approach to mosquito control is being tested. The program aims to use Aedes mosquitoes to destroy their species from within. The National Environment Agency plans to infect millions of Aedes aegypti mosquitoes with a strain of bacteria called Wolbachia. This bacteria interferes with mosquito breeding, thereby decimating the population. Project Wolbachia's principal investigator is Dr. Ng Lee Ching. She's the director of the Environmental Health Institute.
Project Wolbachia is basically releasing mosquitoes to reduce the number of mosquitoes in the community. We release male Aedes aegypti, and they carry Wolbachia bacteria in them. So when these male mosquitoes are released, they will mate with the females in the field. And so the eggs that the female lay then do not hatch. So if you constantly, regularly release the male Wolbachia Aedes, you will see a reduction in the mosquito population in the field. In areas where we have a lot of high Aedes aegypti mosquito population, we have seen up to 90% suppression of the mosquito in the community.
Singapore's Wolbachia project needs careful supervision. Releasing only infected males into the wild means they can't reproduce and they have a limited lifespan. So scientists aim to breed 5 million infected mosquitoes every week to sustain a steady supply of infected males.
NEA will keep having to release the infected males and then keep releasing it and in large enough numbers to compete with wild-type uninfected males. Right? So there are those things that, although it is theoretically exciting, but practically there's still a lot of challenges.
Unlike Singapore's approach, scientists in California plan to make mosquitoes that reproduce indefinitely. Instead, they will carry a new genetic code that renders them harmless.
We genetically modified the mosquitoes, and then we do genetics and testing on them.
Dr. Omar Akbari genetically engineered Aedes aegypti mosquitoes to produce antibodies that neutralize the dengue virus. Instead of transmitting disease, these mosquitoes help eliminate the virus. Once they mate in the wild, these mosquitoes should pass resistance to dengue on to future generations.
When you release the mosquitoes with a gene drive, it would naturally spread on its own, right? And so we think that would be a lot more efficient than trying to vaccinate every single person in an area. And the goal there is to either design mosquitoes that can replace the population and persist, or suppress and eliminate the population.
While this revolutionary approach needs further testing, most countries continue to rely on tried and tested strategies. Near the Thai city of UBON, volunteers inspect villages for mosquito larvae.
วันนี้อสม.เฮามาพร้อมกันแล้วบ่คะ
คืออสม.ต้องนำผลสำรวจในแต่ละสัปดาห์ไปลงในลิงก์ของอำเภออีกครั้งหนึ่งเพื่อสรุปการควบคุมโรคไข้เลือดออกประจำสัปดาห์ของแต่ละตำบลของแต่ละรพสต.ค่ะ
ต้นไปเลยแล้วให้เปลี่ยนน้ำใหม่ให้
และที่สำคัญเราโชคดีที่เรามีทีมงานอสม.ทีมงานอสม.นี้เข้ามามีส่วนร่วมในการควบคุมไข้เลือดออกได้อย่างดีเราจะมีเรื่องของทางโรงเรียนซึ่งจะให้สื่อศึกษากับทางเด็กนะครับเพราะว่าส่วนใหญ่แล้วมันก็จะมีส่วนหนึ่งที่ติดอยู่ในส่วนของโรงเรียนซึ่งเป็นแหล่งสาธารณะ
While Thailand educates its population on mosquito control, Singapore's National Environment Agency seeks to empower its citizens to monitor data on where mosquitoes are breeding. It begins with a nationwide mosquito surveillance program with the use of mosquito traps.
So it's a pot of water that attracts mosquito and a sticky lining. And it attracts female mosquito that are looking for a place to lay her eggs. And when she comes in, she'll get trapped. And by collecting this number of mosquito, we can tell the population in the field, at least the trending, is it going up or down. And now we have more than 60,000 gravity traps all over Singapore.
The agency collects data from thousands of mosquito traps and uploads the information onto a mobile app.
If you go into my ENV app, you can see where are the areas with high mosquito population, and that should motivate people to search for breeding habitats to prevent the formation of dengue clusters in your region.
Armed with technology, information, and education, ordinary people can take a stand against mosquitoes.
Without the help of the people who live in the houses in those cities, we'll never probably be able to control the mosquito.
So to win the global war against infectious diseases, we must all become disease hunters.